to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Always excited to see everybody, of course. However, today's show is going to be a lot different, and I'm going to be talking about something and covering something I normally wouldn't on this program. However, I think it's very, very important that this gets talked about and gets brought to light to everybody, not just here in the Cleveland area, but around the world. Now, many of you know that my podcast here started out as a college radio show in 1998 on a station with the call letters WBWC 88.3. I loved my time there. The show ran for, the better part of 25 years, and I learned a lot from college radio. And I learned a lot that I have taken with me throughout my entire life that has not only contributed to any success that I've had, but college radio opened up a lot of opportunities for me personally. Well, there's another college radio station here, which goes by the call letters WCSB, and of course the frequency on the dial was 89.3. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that this radio station had its signal literally stolen from it by Ideastream Media, and now that station plays nothing but jazz music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, I'm bringing this up, number one, because there are heavy metal shows on that station, at least there were, and there are metal DJs that I've known for the better part of 20 years. But that station also was very diverse. It probably had the most diverse group of people that I've ever seen under one roof. And the programming was easily the most diverse that I've ever seen at any one radio station. They had every genre of music represented there, from heavy metal to jazz to punk to alternative to rap to hip hop to classical. Even shows that had like ethnic music, like German music and Arabic music and Spanish music and Slovenian music and Polish music. And, I mean, there's more, but you kind of understand where I'm going with this. The station had close to 98, I think it had around 98 to 100 shows. I don't remember how many people were hosting shows on there, but every one of those voices was silenced by Cleveland State University, which is the campus that the station resides on, and Ideastream Media. So let me give you a brief synopsis of what exactly happened. So October 3rd, 2025, the station's signal was taken away at 11:16 a.m. Basically, Ideastream took over the signal. And then at 11:35 a.m., the Cleveland State University president, Laura Bloomberg, decides to host a Zoom meeting. And this Zoom meeting actually leaked for a time, and then it was taken down. But that Zoom meeting had her telling the students that the station as they knew it was no more. And she had told them that for months they had been planning this and negotiating this, and that the people involved with this had to sign a non-disclosure agreement so they couldn't talk about it. So this university plotted and schemed behind the backs of these students and these volunteers and the people that helped make that station what it is. And in 1 half-hour period, completely destroyed 49 years of history, culture, and diversity. The other thing during this Zoom meeting that really appalled me was that she said she will take comments but won't answer questions. So number one, you don't have the guts to face the students. And number two, you don't have the guts to answer their questions. And then in one final act of cowardice, she has any students in that building escorted out by the campus police like they were a group of criminals. Folks, I got to be honest with you. This is actually one of the most appalling things I've ever seen. This is one of the most egregious things I've ever seen. And this is such a tragedy to have that diversity taken away from this city and from the volunteers and students that ran that college radio station. And it's an absolute travesty. Folks, when you are a leader of anything, especially an institution of higher learning, one of the things that you are supposed to be doing is setting the example, setting the positive example, setting the positive example that every student in that, around that campus or in that campus should aspire to be. And you know what they did? The administration of that institution set a very bad example and set the example of what you should not be. Now, if you want to see real leadership, the station's general manager, Allison Baumgardner, is what leadership is. She is the epitome of leadership because she is a senior. She could easily have walked away from this whole situation and said, well, it's been a good run. I'm done. I graduate in May, but she didn't. She galvanized the troops, as we want to call it, and is fighting with the community and with the people that made that station so special to keep it alive and get it back. Folks, they took away the voices of close to 100 people. But today, I'm going to bring one of those voices here, and I'm going to give that individual a voice that was so abruptly stolen from him. And that is a man by the name of Eric Chmielewski. Eric hosted for 23 years a heavy metal show called Into the Void. And we talk about this situation. We talk about what happened. Lastly, before I get into this interview, I just want to say in the show notes, there is going to be contact info for Cleveland State University and, of course, for Ideastream. And anybody that's pissed off about this should let them know that they are angry about this and that the station needs to be given back to the people that made it so great and to give it back to the community. That contact info is going to be in the show notes. And I can tell you, a lot of people are pissed. I've not seen one positive comment about this. Cleveland City Council members are mad. Not only are you seeing alumni react to this in a very negative fashion, but the community is outraged over this. So Eric and I, we talk about this in depth, and I'm not going to make you wait any longer for this interview. This is the interview with myself and Eric Chmielewski of WCSB 89.3. Welcome, everybody, back to the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you, and of course, really excited today to have Eric Chmielewski. He was a longtime host of a great heavy metal show called Into the Void, appropriately named after one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs. And we are here to talk about something that had happened on October 3rd, which coincidentally was my birthday. And we are here to talk about the hostile takeover, essentially the hijacking of the airwaves of WCSB 89.3. And we are going to talk in detail about that. I first heard of Eric's show quite a few years ago. I used to follow a show by that was called This Is Metal, I believe it was called. That was Bob Delchin, somebody that has actually, when I was doing college radio, had come down to the studio with Bill Peters a couple times, and we did a Dio tribute show and a lot of other fun stuff. But just, I want to give a background of myself to everybody. I was involved in college radio for 25 years. That is where this podcast originated. And all of the banners I want you to look at behind me. This banner, the banner in the middle, and this one here. All of these are a symbol of things that happened for me as a result of college radio. So this banner here, this is an album I sang on called Architect of Hope by Empires of Eden. A lot of what I learned in college radio when it comes to networking and meeting musicians, this was a result of that. The band directly behind me, Halloween, is a band that I worked for, which is a direct result of what I learned in college radio. And this band over here is another band, Iron Maiden, who sold millions of records around the world. I ended up getting to meet them because of college radio. And I'm starting off the intro about myself to give you a little bit of a background of who I am. Many of you would have known me as Officer Metal on 88.3 WBWC. I was there for a very, very long time. Basically, a large majority of that time, I would say at least 23 years of that time was on the Friday night time slot. And then ever since then, after I left, basically turned my radio show into a podcast. So a little bit of background on me. And I want people to know that I am doing this because I think, in my opinion, what I would consider a crime has happened with WCSB and their airwaves basically getting hijacked by Ideastream. And this is the reason why I'm bringing you on here, Eric, because I'm going to give you what CSU took away from you, and that is a voice. So maybe a little background on you and who you are, and how you ended up getting to college radio, and then we'll discuss the issue at hand, which is basically Ideastream taking over WCSB and being allowed to play jazz 24/7, and basically taking away the voices of probably one of the most diverse communities in the entire city. So the floor is yours right now.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on tonight, Tony. I really appreciate the opportunity. So, college radio brings people together, so a story of how I first became aware of you. We're talking going back to early June of 1998, a little over 27 years ago now. I used to listen to a show on 88.7 called
Metal Meltdown.
Metal Meltdown with Dr. Metal.
Yep.
And, so I remember when I was a freshman in high school, like spring of 1998, he first had an early morning time slot, I think maybe like 6 to 8 a.m. So when I was waking up, getting ready for school, I'd listen to him in my room. I'd listen to him on my Walkman on the bus on the way to high school that year. And then I think came summer, he got like a late afternoon time slot, when the semester changed. And so, I was able to kind of listen even more. And, I was out of school. It was the summertime. And, he started playing this band, Sabotage, on his radio show because they had a new album out at the time, The Wake of Magellan. And, I was probably the only 15-year-old kid, certainly in my school, even amongst my other friends, that like, hard rock and heavy metal, listening to a band like Sabotage because, that was not popular with my age group. But I really enjoyed them. And I remember you brought the band down to his show for an interview. I think the day before they played a show at Peabody's, which I did get to go to with a friend of mine. Got to go to that show. I think I won a ticket either from Dr. Metal or maybe Bill Peters. And so that's kind of my first memory of you, hearing you. And I think you would kind of drop in on Dr. Metal show every now and then over the years. And, even back then, the internet certainly wasn't nearly what it is now. So I kind of knew you had the show at WBWC, but, back then didn't have the capability to listen because I lived in University Heights, outside of the broadcast range. But that's kind of how I became aware of you. And, here are you and I now, we're here now, 27 plus years later, having a conversation. So, college radio brings people together. Certainly.
It does. I can tell you. So Dr. Metal was Nick Fletcher, a very good dude. To give people a little bit of a background before I kind of go into what happened with CSB, Dr. Metal was a phenomenally awesome dude. He really was. He was a lot of fun to hang out with. Part of the reason I started my show was because of him. He kind of, watching him do a show and how much fun he had doing it is what inspired me initially to, basically go into college radio. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. So you talk about the Sabotage thing. Sabotage was the first band I ever met. They were the first band. I had them in my car. It was like blown out of the water that I had this really awesome band riding in my 1989 Chevy Beretta and bringing them down to what was then the WUJC studio and bringing them down there to do that interview. And I remember listening to Nick, play songs while I was in the car with John Oliva and Chris Caffrey. Now obviously two of the guys, involved the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's pretty crazy. And it's pretty crazy you remember that because a lot of people don't. But yeah, it was great. I'll tell you one fun fact about that before we go into what we're going to go into. Nick did something absolutely incredibly awesome. I set him up with an interview with Marcus Grauskopf, the bass player from Halloween, back in, I think it was August of 2000. And it was funny. He was taking callers on the air, and I hear this dude call in with a very, very weird sounding voice. I'm like, this dude doesn't sound like he's from America. and he was just messing with Marcus live over the air, and it turned out to be Tobias Sammet from Avantasia. And I guess him and Dr. Metal, Nick Fletcher, they ended up planning this, and I had no knowledge of it. So I'm reacting to it like Marcus is confused. I'm like, who is this guy? But it was actually one of the funniest things I've ever heard. I do have a recording of it somewhere, but again, this is, of course, a story of how college radio impacts people. Nick was definitely somebody in the very early days that really inspired me. And I do owe a lot of my start.
I got to know him fairly well too. I would call him a lot, talk music with him during the show, make requests. I did get to go into the studio when he was down there a couple of times. He was nice enough to kind of let me come and hang out with him for a little bit when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So he was always a real nice guy.
Yeah, really good dude. So let's go into what happened. So for those of you that know who I am and listen to this show, I usually, when I have bands on, I always provide a voice for those bands. I've had everyone from, hard right-wing Trump supporters. I think the election was stolen. I've had people on from bands that absolutely hate the American political system and refuse to come here. I'm open to always having discussions. And the discussion today actually, and with what happened, actually absolutely disgusts me. So I'm going to let everybody know what exactly happened. So October 3rd, my birthday, at 11:15 a.m., there was basically a takeover of the WCSB airwaves by Ideastream. And then at 11:35 a.m., there was a Zoom call from the president of Cleveland State University, a Zoom call, not a face-to-face call. I want to make sure we know that. A Zoom call for 15 minutes, basically telling the students the station is done. Ideastream is now doing the programming. They are in charge of it. And in one half hour, they annihilated 49, close to 50 years of history and culture in this city in 1.5 hour span. And then on top of it, they had the students escorted out by the campus police like they were criminals. Because I watched the News Channel 5 when Allison Baumgartner was doing that interview, and all of a sudden the cops show up in the middle of the interview and escort all of the students out. They weren't able to take any of their belongings, their music collections, any personal items, nothing. Their key cards were locked out. They were locked out. And basically they were told that the programming is going to somebody else, that they are no longer a part of that station. That is what they were told. And the interesting thing is, I started researching things. So first of all, I believe the budget of the school is $143 million, right? I believe through fundraising, the students, and I could be wrong, but a lot of that station was fundraised by students and volunteers, usually 40 to 50 grand a year.
Yep,
and so
our annual radiothon.
Right, correct. And the school was maybe paying 40 grand out of that $143 million, which is basically like a low-paid part-time employee, essentially. So it's not like they were hedging money on this. It's not like they were losing money on this. They did, and the thing that really, really appalls me is somebody posted the Zoom call from the president of the college and another member of the administration telling the students that this negotiation had been going on for months. And then on top of the fact it's been going on for months, they had people that had to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, to not talk about it.
Between the CSU administration and Ideastream. Correct.
Correct. So they go ahead and do this, and they basically plotted this backdoor deal behind the backs of the students. Ideastream comes in, takes over, they escort everybody out, and that is what happened to a station with close to 50 years of history and diversity. And I got to be honest with you, when I saw that and I saw what happened, I was in disbelief that this happened.
I was in shock for about the first 24 hours myself.
Right. So
everybody else at the station was as well.
So let me get your reaction. What were your feelings when you found out about this? Is my story accurate? Is like what I'm saying accurate?
Yeah, no,
And
completely, Tony. Yeah, the university administration, was, kind of plotting this behind the scenes, with Ideastream. My understanding, as of right now, is that I don't know, some months ago, at some point earlier this year or whatever, Ideastream approached the CSU administration, basically asking them, hey, we want to, take over WCSB 89.3 FM and make it part of, of Ideastream, to have that be another one of our stations. And apparently the CSU administration agreed, which, to me on the surface, again, makes no sense. Like, why would they agree to this? Because as you said, we were, the university was spending very little money on us as an institution each year. We fundraised most of our own money, paid most of our expenses every year.
Mhm.
So when things like all the equipment in our radio station, our turntables, our CD players, our microphones, our computers, when we've had to repair parts on our transmitter over the years, 95%, if not 100% of the money spent on those things, comes from our fundraising efforts every year and all the wonderful
Sure.
people that listen that, pledge their support each year during Radiothon. So yeah, and of course the university has never claimed that this was about money, but I just want to make that point. That certainly is not the reason why they would choose to do this. So kind of where this came from or what motivated them to agree to this with Ideastream is really just beyond me. It makes no sense at all. And yeah, so actually, I guess it's my understanding that probably, let's say at midnight, kind of overnight, Thursday to Friday last week, I think is when they kind of shut off everybody's key card access. So the first live programmer Friday morning had their show start at 4 a.m. They show up about maybe 3:30. Want to show up a little bit early to prepare for their show. Their key cards don't work. They were savvy enough to go to the CSU police station and say, "Hey, come let us in. Our key cards don't work." Because over the years, that's an issue from time to time, especially people that have really late night time slots or very early morning time slots. When
Sure.
it's not business hours, there's nobody
Mhm.
in the building. Maybe the show before them is an automated one or pre-recorded, so there's nobody there to let them in. So that's something we've kind of already had to do over the years. Is occasionally, go down to the police station or call them. They come and let us in. Of course, this is the first time that the reason for that is because the administration of CSU, intentionally locked members of WCSB out of our own radio station. That was never the reason in the past for us having to do that. So the students at the time probably didn't think anything of it because this is just a thing that'll happen every now and then.
Yeah.
So point being is we were able to stay on the air and broadcast from 4 a.m. until I think 11:15. 11:16 a.m. is when our signal was actually cut and turned over to Ideastream. It was 11:16
Right.
a.m. on Friday, October 3rd. So we were actually able to be in there and broadcast for 7 hours and 15 minutes longer than this, with live broadcasting, when the CSU administration had never intended for us to go that long. They were just, so my thought is, like when they were when was the CSU administration going to bother to tell, all of us members of WCSB that they had done this? Because, this was not communicated to anybody at the station at all, not even our chief engineer and our assistant engineer, who are responsible for things like,
Sure.
turning the transmitter on and off and making sure all equipment's working, things of that nature. They weren't even informed. So yeah, the administration just did this completely behind our backs, in the dark, stabbed us in the back as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
And, one thing that I think angers so many people about that, including I think you and I, is, what kind of message does that send to student and alumni ran organizations that are, officially affiliated with Cleveland State University?
Mhm.
What a complete slap in the face that the
Right.
administration would do that to a student and alumni ran organization.
Mhm.
And it's my thought is if they can do that to WCSB, it's kind of showing us they're capable of that kind of behavior towards any student and alumni organization, that has a presence on campus at the university.
Right.
That's just completely disgusting and unacceptable.
Well, let me give you my take on the whole situation. And this is probably going to be a little bit of a long-winded rant. So you
I just
mentioned
went on a long rant, so go right ahead.
that what kind of message does this send, right, to the other student organizations that are on the campus? And you make a very good point. Here's the thing. The president of this college, right? When you are in a position of power or a position of leadership, so let's take, for example, an institution of higher learning. You are the person that is leading that institution, and you are supposed to be the example, and you're supposed to set the example that every student in that campus or on that campus should aspire to be just like you. You are supposed to lead by example,
100%.
right? Well, here's the thing. This is what happened. She didn't have the guts to be face to face with the students. When, I don't know if you saw the Zoom call, but when you see the Zoom call, she says, I'll take some comments, but I won't answer any questions. Then on top of it, she has the campus police escorting kids out of the building on top of that. Now, the other thing is, when they did this, there was nothing presented to the students as another solution for them to go and do something elsewhere, like a streaming station, nothing. And then on
HD radio or maybe something of that
right.
nature.
And then on top of that, they had 7 months of, I think it was, I don't know if it was 7 months, but they had months of knowledge prior to this. And then she doesn't really address anybody, doesn't want to answer any questions from anybody. You know what that tells me? That tells me she should not be in that position. That tells me that you do not deserve to be in a leadership position when you handle a situation the way that this was handled. When
100%.
you do a backdoor deal, when you don't have the guts to be face to face with the students, to basically strip basically their lives away, basically stripping a cultural icon in this entire city. And then on top of that, if you watch that Zoom call, she was very indifferent. And she literally looked, all the administrators, anybody I think the two of them that were on there, they looked like they couldn't have cared less about the students. And you want to know what? If there are so many great opportunities that they allegedly say are going to happen as a result of this, well, why didn't you list them out? Why did you have to hide this from everybody? Because they knew it was wrong. And they do not have the guts to face the consequences or face the students. That is a sign of a coward. That is what cowards do. That is a sign of a lack of leadership. And I'm going to tell you something. If you want to know what leadership looks like, let's look at Allison Baumgartner. Allison Baumgartner, the general manager of the station. She could easily say, you know what? I graduate soon. I really don't, I basically can just say, hell with it. I'm going to be gone soon anyway. But no, she was out there leading a protest. She was out there trying to galvanize people together to save the community that has been created over the last 50 years surrounding this station. And on top of that, if you really want to rub salt in the wound, they did this on college radio day, which tells me how inept and how out of touch the administration at this school is.
And Ideastream, because I seriously doubt either entity realized.
Right. Well, we're
going
to get into Ideastream here in a minute. But here's the thing. I want people to know this right now. WCSB, as an entity, as a community, is easily the most diverse group of people I have ever seen. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with that station, they had shows with ethnic, cultural shows, Hungarian music, German music, Slovenian music, Arabic music, Spanish music. I mean, they had shows.
Reggae, Afro-Cuban, across the board with all kinds of
correct
music.
And then everybody that I've known at that radio station, so many people came from so many different cultural backgrounds and political ideologies. The crazy thing is I know people there that are right wingers, that are left wingers, that are, centrists. You have people from the LGBTQ community. You have people that are representing different ethnicities as far as their shows are concerned. And all of that was wiped away to play one genre of music. And then they claim, oh, we want diversity. We're going to create all these opportunities for people. Well, no, you're not. That's not what you're doing at all. So entities like Ideastream are just as bad as what Clear Channel did, the commercial radio, except they use it as a disguise to say, hey, we're a charitable organization, but they're doing the
Or a
exact same
nonprofit,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, they're doing the exact same thing to independent radio and to college radio, just like Clear Channel did to the commercial radio stations and completely ruined them. And that is what Ideastream is doing, because there is absolutely no reason this would be done at all, unless you have a reason that you might think of. But I can tell you flat out right now, this
I
is
can't think of any, yeah.
okay. Well, I can think of one. So let's talk about Ideastream for a minute, right? You know, I find it interesting. They had months of these negotiations, and then suddenly, at the end of September, a press release comes out from the Fowler Family Foundation of $1 million donation to Jazz NEO, which is what's being basically broadcast over WCSB 24/7. So, folks, if you're interested in your dentist office and elevator music, by all means, right now, you can tune into 89.3 and you can hear all of that you want. You don't have to go to the dentist office anymore. You don't have to even go to Spotify anymore. You can go listen to it there. And you have this $1 million donation. And then coincidentally, a few days later, guess what? Jazz NEO and Ideastream pretty much hijacked the airwaves at WCSB. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't have any proof of that, obviously. And did the foundation...
Seems awfully suspicious timing, that's for sure.
Right, suspicious timing. And here's the other thing. I don't know if the Fowler Family Foundation really knew where that money was going to go, what was going to happen, but I find it hard to believe you're going to donate that amount of money without knowing where it's going.
Or kind of the manner in which it's going to be used.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Right. And every statement from the school, every statement from Ideastream is all them backpedaling, giving generic quotes, trying to see if this will blow over and people are going to just stop complaining about it after a couple weeks. I can tell you that that's not going to happen.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Because you can't go out, you know, when you go back and do a backdoor deal like that, you don't have the guts to face the student body that's involved with it. And then you intimidate them using police. Now, granted, the police probably weren't doing anything like that. But if you're a student and you're a young kid and the cops say you need to leave, and then they lock you out of the building, if you're young and you don't know any better, you're probably going to be intimidated by it.
Sure.
So that is what they've done. And you know, and I want you to elaborate a little bit more with this happening. What has been lost as a result of this? You're probably better at talking about that than I am because you have been there for over 20 years. But I want to know what your take is as far as what has been lost when it comes to this radio station.
You know, I mean, just that, you know, a sense of community, you know, certainly, because that's what WCSB was. You know, it's a community and part of, you know, I think a larger or broader college radio community and culture that we have here in Northeast Ohio. You know, over the years, I've heard many people say, you know, that there's nowhere else in the country, if not the world, that has college radio like Cleveland, just in terms of the diversity we have, the dedication of people that are involved with this, which, you know, for a while, I guess I found hard to believe that. I would think, you know, maybe bigger cities like Chicago or New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or, you know, Philadelphia or cities like that might have something comparable, because obviously, you know, there's a lot of different ethnic groups and, you know, diversity and you know, big cities like that, you know, but, you know, I've never lived at any of those places, or, you know, have kind of vacationed in some of them here and there, but, you know, not enough to really have a chance to soak in what college radio and other places might be. So I guess I just have to take people's word for it when they make that claim that, you know, there's nowhere else in the world that has it quite like Cleveland has had it in terms of the college radio community that we have. So that's, you know, one thing that is, you know, sort of lost, is, you know, WCSB contributing, you know, to that landscape. Another thing that's lost, you know, is opportunities for students, you know, to join the radio station and become new members and kind of, you know, have those experiences that I was lucky enough to have, you know, when I was a freshman and, you know, a student attending the university, and have been continuing to be a part of it, you know, since I finished graduate school 18 years ago now. But, you know, so yeah. You know, and so, you know, Cleveland State University, I guess, and Ideastream, one of their reasons that they've publicly kind of stated for them doing this is, we want to like create opportunities for students to have, you know, internships or get, you know, on hand experiences, you know, maybe with a communication school or whatever. Not that communication school aspect has been like mentioned by name, but it's maybe that's what they want to do. And my understanding is, for the past 4.5 days now, right, since the takeover occurred, there's no live person in that studio. Maybe an engineer that's up there kind of checking on things or doing things kind of behind the scenes, whatever, but there's nobody going on the air. There's no live programmers on the air talking or, kind of deciding what music they want to play next or, taking phone calls or anything like that. That's all completely gone. 'Cause now it's just a completely automated station 24/7 being run by computers,
Right.
complete automation. And my thought is if the university had maybe approached us and said, hey, you are a student organization and we'd like to maybe work with you to sort of dedicate maybe a certain number of hours a day during, the weekdays, kind of during business hours or, during, or, certain numbers of hours a day per week to maybe kind of work with us to make sure students do have that opportunity to come in, maybe even if they're not students that are apprenticing because they want to become full-fledged members. Like if they had approached us about that and kind of said, hey, we want to, do this to some degree, we probably would have been open to having those discussions with them to see what might have been able to occur to maybe accommodate the university, which, obviously, to a sense, we would have had some obligation to do, being that we, a student alumni organization, an entity of the university, an extension of the university. But, as far as I know, that was never even thought of by the CSU administration, or, I don't think we were ever approached. Not that I have any knowledge in the 23 plus years I've been a member that was ever kind of a thought from the university to approach us in sort of more a diplomatic or democratic way to discuss those things with us. And so like my thought is, if you kicked all the live programmers out, you just have an entity that's run completely on automation. There's no people in there doing live hands-on, getting to learn and experience what it's like to do a radio show and run a radio station. How is that providing students with opportunity? To me, there's a huge disconnect there, at least thus far. I don't quite understand their logic there from what's transpired so far.
Right. One of the things they talk about is, talking about how jazz music is such a big part of the American culture, which it is, but you cannot program culture, you create it. And
you can't program it on a computer that does just automated.
Correct. Right. And there are 98 shows, I believe, at the time. I could be wrong, but it was close to 100 shows that were very unique on that radio station. And that radio station definitely helped create a culture that surrounded it for close to 5 decades. And, one thing I forgot to mention, you mentioned, students wanting to be a part of it. There were 18 apprentices, my son being one of them, as he is a freshman there, and they all lose out on that opportunity.
Correct.
And that, to me, is for lack of a better term, is asinine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, because I was not a broadcast major, okay?
Neither was I. This is something I kind of picked up and did as a hobby, and I think most members of WCSB were not in the School of Communications or majoring in that.
You don't need paid internships to learn life experiences that you would learn at college radio. So I'm going to tell you what I learned in college radio. Much of that, of course, I carry on throughout my entire life. A lot of what I learned there over a 25-year span, especially early on, are things that I learned that I still carry with me today. And there are so many opportunities that basically rose up because of that. So let me first start with this. I learned how to market myself, right? Now, why is that important? I helped market a car magazine that I was taking photos for and helped make that magazine, actually both of those magazines, successful. I became a better speaker and a better communicator as a result of college radio. I had so many things open up for me as far as interacting with not only people locally, but people around the country and people completely all the way around the world globally, right? I worked for a German heavy metal band in Halloween. That opportunity never would have happened if it weren't for college radio, for example. Singing on some records with some great musicians from around the world. Never would have happened to me if I was never introduced to the music business or the music world, if it weren't for college radio. Me being somebody that wrote press releases for bands, that never would have happened if I never entered the world of college radio. And as a result of writing those press releases, it also helped me write for 2 car magazines, as I mentioned before, right? I met so many people in my friend circle. I learned how to conduct myself better as an individual. And a lot of these things are very important in life in general. And I learned
life skills, yeah.
Right. This show, me producing this show, where did I learn how to do production? It started out in college radio. And all of those experiences now are pretty much gone for a lot of these students because, they're going to say we're going to get these paid internships. Well, if it was so beneficial, why'd you have to hide it? I'm going to bring that up again. So then it's what it's done for me. And for you, I'm curious from your experiences what it did for you.
Just having a lot of forming a lot of relationships, definitely my kind of me choosing to sort of immerse myself in this college radio culture, has, a lot of my friends, people I consider, among some of my closest friends, I met because I was a member of WCSB, and people I've gotten to know at other stations, such as yourself, and people like Bill Peters over at the WJCU, and Jason Parks, Jason at WRUW, and other DJs in the past who are no longer on that station, that I connected with, because
right.
of my love of heavy metal music and college radio, and people I called up kind of as a kid when I was a teenager, just as a listener, and asking them questions about the music they were playing. And then, when a few years later, when I started my own show on WCSB, able to connect with those people as, as equals, as colleagues, and that, those relationships kind of then having that different element to them. So yeah, that, and also, having some exchanges with people in the music industry, because I was also the heavy metal genre director at WCSB for 19 years now. I was doing that. I took over from the guy that was doing it before me in 2006. So and then doing that end of things, and I certainly have not interviewed nearly as many bands as you have, but I've interviewed some ones that I really like, national, international bands, both in person, and
sure,
a couple of people call in, and local bands. I always had an open door policy for local bands, if they wanted to come in, do interviews, talk about records they had coming out, shows they were playing. I did quite a number of those over the years.
Yeah.
Then forming those relationships, and then the club owners and venue owners who I know were really appreciative of WCSB promoting their shows, playing music by local bands and bands touring, playing local venues around town, and those relationships, partnerships with a lot of those venues, and doing ticket giveaways, all that sort of stuff,
right.
WCSB putting on events then at some of those clubs over the years, events we would sponsor, and again with Radiothon, dollar donations, when we had to kick in money to put on events, we were able to do that.
You mentioned bands coming on your show. There are many bands out there that credit college radio for their early success and what helped them propel them to success, right? They ended up getting their start through college radio. Let me give you one of the biggest examples, because it's the one everybody's posting. Lars Ulrich from Metallica. Metallica has sold millions of records. I believe the Black Album is still selling like 5,000 copies a week or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And he had a WCSB shirt on, right? That's where he ended up getting his start. And if you want to kind of go locally, at 88.3, we had a local artist show for many years. It was with a guy by the name of Jim Benson. And he would have bands on like Filter, or bands like 9 Inch Nails, bands that, started out coming down to college radio stations and getting their early success, promoting themselves through that. Right. And, you had a lot of that. And let's talk about some other people. I'm going to bring up some other people that have been successful as a result of college radio.
Sure.
So you mentioned Bill Peters. What's kind of throw him out there? He's had his show since I believe the summer of 1982 on
The
WJCU.
longest running heavy metal show on radio anywhere in the world.
Correct.
Right here in Cleveland.
Right. And at
How
one
awesome is
point,
that?
yeah, and it is, because at one point, Dr. Metal used to be on right before him on RUW. Bill was on afterwards, and then my show would come on right after Bill's. So if you went down the dial, you went from 91.1 to 88.7.
Like 9 hours of heavy metal music on a Friday night. Yeah.
Right. And that's something that was pretty unique to us, which you mentioned about the college radio culture being unique to Cleveland. But let's take a look at Bill, for example. So Bill started the show, learned about the music industry, put out an independent compilation called Cleveland Metal that many people may have forgotten about. He ended up working for Warner Brothers in the music business for a long time, right? He had his own record label. And as a result and as a result of getting introduced to the music business through college radio, Bill has taken bands of his over to Europe to play some pretty big festivals. This is a guy who ended up getting his start in college radio. I'll talk about another local person, Joe Cleon. Many people locally know Joe Cleon. He's probably probably the most well-known concert photographer here in Cleveland. He's photographed everyone from Iron Maiden to Paul McCartney to Taylor Swift, and he had a long career in radio. He was at 98.5, the classic rock station, for a while. He was down in Georgia. I believe he was at a station in Akron at one point, and he learned the ropes in college radio, and he had a great career in it, which led to him, taking that interest in photography, and through people that he probably knew, ended up getting some opportunities. And now this guy is like one of the premier concert photographers in Cleveland. So these are people that ended up getting their start in college radio. There's if you know the sports guy, Matt Underwood, he spent time at WBWC, and I could probably sit here for an hour and name probably 40 people at WBWC over the years that have worked for MTV. They've worked in television. I mean, these people have been successful, and they learned a lot of that skill set by being in college radio. So paid internships, they're great, but how much is that going to teach somebody? Because you can have someone with a paid internship all day long, but it's the experience. It's the learning curve. You're not going to get that from some generic paid internship through Ideastream. It's just not going to happen. So, and I could sit here and name numerous people over the years that have used the skill set they learned at a college radio station throughout their entire lives. And that is the impact it has. So when this kind of stuff happens, and you see the hypocrisy from Ideastream that claims they want diversity and opportunity, from a college that claims they want diversity and opportunity, from a foundation or a charitable foundation that claims they want the same thing, and then they rip away that actual opportunity and diversity from a community. It doesn't matter what kind of statements they make. It doesn't matter what kind of what kind of statements that they want to put out there to try to backpedal away from this thing or try to sugarcoat it. The bottom line is their own behavior dictates where their priorities are. And for me personally, the way that this looks, I'm going to be honest with you, Eric, the way this looks, Eric, it looks like you have a greedy nonprofit wanting to have control over more stations. You had some rich person with a lot of money who wants to throw their money around for their own little personal pet vanity project. And then they stomped on the students to make that happen. It's just, and it's not even, a lot of people are pointing at politicians. It has nothing to do with that. This is everything to do with somebody that has a lot of money to spend. They want to throw their weight around. They want to stroke their own ego. And Ideastream ate up the money. And then now they use that probably as some kind of leverage to be able to take over a radio station, screw the students. They don't care about them. If they cared about the students, what would have happened is they would have said, we're doing this. However, we have an alternative solution for you. They didn't do that at all. Nope. Not at all. They had no alternative solution at all. They didn't say, hey, you can use your studio for podcasting if you want, or if you want to do a streaming station, you can do that. They didn't do that.
Nope.
They had no solution.
Nothing.
They didn't name any of these, quote, opportunities that they claim are going to happen. And then you have the president up there. She's up there saying, well, it's going to be a rough transition. Well, of course it's going to be a rough transition because now people are outraged. They are pissed off. I think the anger is actually ramped up more over it than it happened the first day.
I think
the first day it happened.
Bigger and bigger, like every
yeah.
day.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to tell you what. And you know what? The right thing to do would be to give the station back. The ultimate PR move would be to say, you know what?
We screwed up.
We screwed up. We're sorry. They would get so many points for admitting that. But unfortunately, people like that, they have an ego. They will never admit that they are wrong. And that, unfortunately, and exactly. And the only way it would really change is if people stopped donating money to Ideastream, to the school, and anything else that's affected by this. Because all these people, I'll tell you what, there's lots of people saying I'm canceling my membership. There's people out there campaigning to stop donating to Ideastream. Because with the way that this was handled, in some of these statements, like Ideastream statements, and it's even funnier. They posted an article about people being on their Facebook page just not long, about 10 minutes ago, before we started this interview, about how people are outraged over CSU getting taken over, by Ideastream.
Posted about this on their Facebook page.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. And then they made a comment, "Oh, this isn't a takeover." Well, of course it is.
Yeah,
you hijacked the airwaves, right? Oh, it's not really a takeover. Yeah, it is. And they are trying to sugarcoat this and dance around this, and nobody is buying it. And the interesting thing about this whole thing, when they talk about diversity, you talk about unity. This is one of the because we have a divided country. You know this. We talk about it all the time. We have a divided country. I have never seen people from so many different walks of life, political ideologies, different communities, different ethnicities ever come together for one purpose, and that is to save the station. You don't really ever see that too often, but man, they've galvanized people from every walk of life, every political ideology, everything, because a lot of people are pretty pissed. And I have seen, my whole Facebook feed is nothing but, I can't believe what they did to WCSB. My entire Facebook feed, the Facebook,
too.
The Facebook
for the
feed,
last 4 days now.
And the Facebook feed for the Metal Command page on Facebook, which normally, you have algorithms, right? And I wasn't clicking on WCSB stuff at all, hardly. Man, that feed on that page, when I log into that account, is like, it's crazy. So I got to be honest with you, this is one of the most egregious things I've ever seen done to a group of students at a college in a long time. Mm-hmm. I got to give props to Allison Baumgartner, the GM of the station, for not giving up, for not saying, hey, you know what? I'm graduating away and just dipping out. She stood her ground, got a lot of people to go down and do a silent protest. There's a petition I just saw, which I'm going to put as a link, in the show notes, once I put this interview out.
Please do, yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, they committed a sin, folks. I haven't watched it yet, but there's people at the Cleveland City Council meetings that were flipping out about it, like
members
city council members.
Several members of Cleveland City Council. This came up because we're recording this on the evening of it's Tuesday, October 7th. Is what you and I are talking right now. So this was last night on Monday, October 6th. At the weekly public Cleveland City Council meeting. This was mentioned, which we were totally floored when we found that out last night, and us WCSBs, we were talking about it amongst ourselves. Just the fact that they would bring this up and mention this at their city council meeting, that really lets us know, hey, we did something very important and valuable and positive, for the community all these years. And just, so, on a positive note, starting Friday morning, or, early Friday afternoon when all this dropped, myself personally and, all the other members of WCSB, we were just overwhelmed with all the support, we've been getting, from fellow college radio, current and former, DJs, record store owners, venues, we've worked with, and just all the listeners in the community that, are against this. And, so many articles have been written, and obviously, TV, Channel 5, I think Channel 19, Fox 8, have all picked up on this and been reporting on it. Just today on campus, I wasn't able to attend, because I had to work my day job. But there is a silent protest on campus. I believe your son attended it.
He did.
And many other people, current and former WCSB members, and just people from the community, to silently voice their displeasure about this. There are a lot of really good signs that people held up. And I obviously the point of it being silent is to drive the point home of CSU silenced WCSB and this community by taking that voice off the air in the manner that they did. So I thought that was very appropriate.
Yeah, I saw a couple of the protesters with their mouth taped up with duct tape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely saw that. I saw some of the signs. It just, to me, the way they handled this, what they did was absolutely. It was such a huge stab in the back, and the way they handled this was literally probably for me one of the most unprofessional things I have ever seen. It is absolutely. To put it this way, again, when I watched the Zoom call that somebody posted, they didn't have a care in the world with their demeanor. They looked like they couldn't have cared less. This is what's happening. You're done. Oh, let's call the cops too, by the way, and have you escorted out. They just look like they didn't care. You can tell by the body language. You can tell by the way they were speaking. It was so like business as usual. We don't care what we ruined. We're bringing in our friends Ideastream, and they're just going to run the thing now.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and so to go back what you were saying earlier, I think one of the best things people can do right now immediately is and this is one thing I think Ideastream sort of didn't realize, which kind of shows maybe they don't know they're listening and donating demographic nearly as well as they think they do. Here in this area, I don't think they realize just how many people who are listeners to college radio stations like WCSB here in Cleveland were also listeners to WCPN and WKSU and viewers of WVIZ. The Ideastream stations that there's a lot of crossover. I think myself included. In terms of mainstream news, NPR was one of my go-tos. I don't. There's not too many mainstream news outlets I'm interested in trying to view personally,
right?
For many reasons we don't need to get into. But
yeah.
One of the few was NPR and Ideastream here in Cleveland that I would check out daily. Some of their programs to get news about things. I haven't been able to listen to or watch them at all the past 4 days, and that's probably going to last quite a long time. And I know many other people have said the same thing. So I would encourage people, don't tune in to their TV or radio stations or stream them online, please. And don't donate money to them, when they have their membership, pledge drives, and also please don't give any money to the CSU Foundation right now, because that's seems to be a language that people understand, right? As they say, money talks and people listen. So, boycotting with your dollar is a way to really drive that point home, especially right now. So that's something I would encourage everybody to do who's watching this.
With the way that this was handled, I would never want. Everybody should just not donate to any of these entities at all.
Yep.
When I look at the comments on social media, they're all, I don't see anything positive. And the positive comments I do see, you see people say, well, I love jazz music and I love jazz NEO, but that's not right with the way that they did this. So sure. People that are a fan of that type of music are appalled about the way this was handled.
And I have to point out, WCSB has some phenomenal jazz shows on
correct.
Including most recently when we were taking off, we had a couple shows, couple programmers that were playing excellent jazz music, and we've had a fair number of those over the years. Just like we've had a fair number of all sorts of genres of music, over the years.
We'll end it off with this, Eric. Where do we go from here? I mean, are there any protests planned? Is there any kind of contingency plans maybe?
I mean, I can't say a whole lot specifically just because, we're sort of just in the very early planning stages. But, WCSB, we are, brainstorming and kind of exploring our options of how we can move forward to continue to exist as an entity,
Yeah.
and continue to, program non-commercial, independent, underground content and all genres of music and be able to provide that to the community in some manner, in some capacity, whether it's completely independent of the university or maybe in a way that we might continue to have some sort of affiliation with them. And that's really all I can say about it at this point. As we do plan to move forward as best we can.
So, something somebody brought up, you have close to 50 years of music cataloged in the music room there. What happens to all that?
That's still an open question. I can't give an answer about that right now. I mean, thousands of records and CDs and probably several hundred cassette tapes, that we've,
because they've locked everybody out.
Correct. Yeah. No, none of us have access to the station since Friday morning when this all came down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who knows?
It's my understanding. I certainly don't think Ideastream will have any use for our physical music library. If it was in pristine shape, we'd have some things that collectors would be very interested in. But a lot of the things in our collection, I like to say it's very well loved. So it's not in the best of shape because things have been pulled in and out of the shelves and played on the air so many times over the years that
correct.
When you do that, and you've got people doing that constantly, things don't tend to stay in pristine condition. But that's never the point. It's not to sit on a shelf and look nice. It's the music needs to be played. And it certainly was, from our physical music library. I don't think the university or Ideastream would have any use for that stuff. So, what they plan to do with it is an open question at this point.
That's what scares me.
Sure.
And the reason it scares me, if they have no use for it, how do we know they're not going to toss it?
I wish I had an answer for you, but that's definitely a concern.
So I'm going to end it with this. Before we end this conversation, this is probably one of the worst PR moves an administration can make for a school. They should be ashamed of themselves, although it appears that they have no shame. They deserve all the backlash that they are getting.
Go ahead.
For doing what they are doing. The fact, again, I'm going to close it with this. The fact that they would plot and scheme behind everybody's back and then out of nowhere tell the students, because you kept the secret, people had to sign off that they had to keep it a secret, and then you do this to the students. And let's not just forget, they did this to the community too. It wasn't just the student body. They did this to the surrounding community because there were certain specialized broadcast needs that a lot of people had here in the Cleveland area that they were able to get there that they could not get anywhere else. So they pretty much, for a lack of a better term, took a giant shit on the student body, took a giant dump on the community, and they have absolutely no shame for it. And that is because you have people that are out of touch, that have a lack of foresight, and you have people that want to stroke their egos by throwing their money around and throwing their power around to say, hey, this is the agenda we want, and that's it. And I'll be honest with you, it's actually very appalling what happened. Watching the reactions, watching how many people are upset about this, watching students that will probably never get a chance to experience the same things you and I experienced. And then on top of that, the message it sends to all of the other student organizations that are on that campus, it sends the wrong message. And if people are looking, if you want an administration, who's supposed to set the example, if you want a great example, this is a perfect example of what not to do. This is a perfect example of how to not conduct yourself. This is a perfect example of what somebody looks like that has no integrity. And I couldn't care less how many of these administrators have how many degrees framed in mahogany they have around their desks. The bottom line is they pulled off one of the worst things I think I have ever seen. And that tells me either A, they have no empathy and don't care, or B, they're flat out stupid. And it's probably a little bit of both.
Absolutely. So, yeah, just want to, let people know, one thing I was planning to do on my show tomorrow is, you see this shirt I'm wearing here. This is Kanye, Jim Kanye, who was as he would say, "Hi, I'm Jim Kanye. I play drums." He never called himself a drummer for whatever reason, but he would say, "Hi, I'm Jim Kanye. I play drums." So, play drums in many, metal and some punk and hardcore bands too here in Cleveland over the years, and also sang in a couple projects he was involved in. Good friend of mine, big supporter of WCSB, donated a lot of music to us over the years for a music library. And big supporter of college radio here in Cleveland in general. Today is the 10th year anniversary of his passing. So tomorrow, if I were able to do my show tomorrow during my 9 to 11 time slot, tomorrow, Wednesday, October 8th, I was going to do a tribute to him and play 2 hours of Jim Conner music, because he was probably in something like 15 bands over a couple of decades when he was active doing music before he passed away. And so I can't do that now because of the decision that was made a couple of days ago. So
well,
that really kind of
a decision
that hurts, and I won't
right.
have the chance to honor my friend in that way.
It was a decision made months ago. They just had to iron out the details.
Absolutely.
It wasn't made on Friday.
No.
They planned this. They plotted this. And they were waiting for everything to be finalized from a negotiation standpoint to make this happen. An Ideastream moves in, ruins another radio station under the guise of being this nonprofit charity and this nonprofit entity that, is there to benefit all of the public. Guess what? They're doing the exact opposite of it. The backlash is pretty bad towards them. It's pretty bad towards the school as well for making this decision. And the way that they went about this is absolutely one of the worst things I've seen locally here when it comes to something like this, probably ever.
Absolutely.
And, I saw a glimpse of one of the city councilmen in Cleveland going off. I didn't really listen to it yet, but I watched, you get the preview on YouTube. I'm watching this guy just go off. So I have to listen to that.
I know I sent you that link last night, so go check it out. It's only about 5-6 minutes long, so it's not super lengthy. But that was certainly we were really taken aback in a good way to get that kind of support from Cleveland City Council. So I wonder what that will mean. Maybe that will be what really kind of tips the scales here in a way that we would like to have occur. The attention that'll bring to the matter, that could be a game changer potentially. I sure hope it is.
Right. Well, there's a lot of articles that are not favorable to this at all. The scene. This story isn't. I mean, this has been in the press. I mean, this is getting coverage. I think people around the country are finding out about this. So this isn't just even contained to the greater Northeast Ohio area by any means. It's kind of going nationwide and maybe even in some other places. We've gotten reached out to from a WFMU, long running, I think it was college and now it's just community. They went independent from the university in New Jersey, one of the best known college community radio stations in the country. They were posting, they might even messaged our executive staff directly about that. So, just the amount of support we're getting is overwhelming, and we're really taken aback by that, just how much it really shows us just how much what we did, matters to everybody. To a lot of people anyways. Well, Eric, I got to tell you, I appreciate you coming on. It's sad that this is the first time you came on my show. It's sad we have to talk about this, but I feel bad for you. I feel bad for the students. I feel bad for anybody that has been affected in a positive way by that radio station, and the community that is also positively affected by it. They've been robbed. They have been. And I do thank you for taking some time to come and talk to me, and definitely post a link to the petition. I will post a link to a video of some of the protests. I will, you have the college, I think it was the College Radio Foundation. I'll put a link to their post about it because it was evident they weren't happy about it. And again, thanks for coming on to talk about this.
Can I just do a few quick plugs here? Real quick.
Absolutely.
I've been invited to come on some other shows later this week in the next several days. So You can hear me. I'll be on WRUW 91.1 FM on the FM dial here in Northeast Ohio, or streaming online, WRUW.org, with Jay Stone with his show, Lend Me Your Ear. That'll be Friday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. He's invited me to come on. Bill Peters, of course, on WJCU 88.7 FM here in the Cleveland area, or online streaming at WJCU.org. Invited me to come on his show probably for the first maybe half hour to 45 minutes, starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also this Friday, which is October 10th. And then a second time on WREW with, I think, some of the other now former metal DJs at WCSB on a show called Radio Children, which is overnight, Saturday night to Sunday. So the show is technically Sunday morning. So this coming Sunday, October 12th, from midnight to 2 a.m. Again on WREW. So I really appreciate people from those radio stations kind of reaching out to me and making that offer for me to come on and play some music, I think, on those shows, and talk more about what's happening. It is possible that by Friday or Saturday there may be, who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 days. So there may be more I can talk about officially regarding the situation at those times. So people can tune in or stream on in for those appearances. So just wanted to get that out there. So thanks very much, Tony, for having me on.
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.